G'day guys, so today we're doing a stock removal knife build. This steel is a stainless steel cladded San Mai. It comes pre-hardened, so normally what I would do is cut my steel out on a bandsaw. In this instance I'm needing to use the grinder. So basically I've sketched out a pattern of a knife onto the steel, which is from a pre-existing knife that I'd forged. My customer requested that shape in this steel, and it'll be used as a bait knife to accompany the fillet knife that I made out of the same steel. So basically I'll sketch the shape of the knife onto the steel and cut it out as best I can. And then I'll take it to the grinder and finish the profile there. It's not the greatest of tasks doing this, but you know, given that the steel's pre-hardened, I couldn't use the bandsaw. It's important to make sure that you're not overheating the steel as well, as it's pre-hardened. So here I'm drilling the holes for the pins. The drill bit that I'm using is a carbide tipped multi-purpose drill bit. They come in metric sizes. I'm using a 3mm drill bit, and I probably get about 8 holes, and then the drill bits in the bin. They're no good, but it does the job. It's noisy and it gets hot, but it drills through the hardened steel. So here what I'm doing now is putting layout dye down the cutting edge of the blade. What I'll do then is get my calipers and measure the thickness of the steel, divide that by half, roughly, doesn't have to be perfectly in half, and then I'll scribe 2 lines down the center. That'll give me a center line, or a place that I won't grind into when I'm doing a flat grind. It's important to stay away from that edge as best as you can, so you don't thin the steel out too much. A little bit hard to see here in this picture, but there's 2 lines running parallel. Now what I'll do is grind 45s into those lines that I've just scribed. I'm using a dull 36 grit belt. If you used a nice fresh belt for doing this, you will destroy the belt straight away. Deep 45s up to those lines that we scribed. Then what I'll do is put on a fresh belt and start grinding flat. The tricky thing with this steel is it's got an internal core which is cladded with stainless steel, so it's important to remove the outer layer of soft material to expose the internal core, otherwise you'll have soft material on your cutting edge. Once I'm finished with how the bevels are looking with the 36 grit belt, I'll gradually go from 120 to 240 to 400 and 600. Once I'm at 600 grit on the belt, I'll take it to hand sanding. I'll probably start at 320 or 400, get all those scratches out and get the scratch pattern running parallel with the knife. It's a tedious task, but you've got to do it and the results are beautiful once you've done it. I like to do it in a crisscross hexagonal pattern, so each grit I'll go in a different direction, and the last grit I do will be straight, and it's usually 600 grit to get a nice satin finish. Once I'm finished on the hand sanding, I'll generally take it to the buffing wheel. It's not a perfect mirror polish, but it's good enough for etching, which you'll see in a minute. But what I'm doing here is finishing up 600 grit. I generally use Windex when I'm using the high grit sandpaper. I decided that standing up and sanding was the best for me. I used to do it sitting down. So now I've got a piece of timber in my post vise. I've wrapped that bit of timber with duct tape, you know, just to prevent any scratches that might end up on the blade from flipping it over and doing each side. Also, my sanding stick is an old file wrapped in masking tape. So here we're using hydrochloric acid. This is a mix. I'm not sure what it is. It could be a 50-50 mix. Regardless of the mix, this will give us an indication of where the center core is and how accurate and even we got our grinds either side of the blade. What I like doing is using concentrate hydrochloric acid, but I do it in a minute interval each time, wipe it off. This would be where we would now split the wood block in half. I missed that footage, but basically what you're doing is scribing a center line down the middle of it and splitting it in half. It's pretty self-explanatory. After that, we'll be then tracing the shape of the handle onto the wood. You can use a Sharpie, a pencil, doesn't really matter. You can scribe it in just to get an idea of where you're at on the piece. Will it fit? Will it not? I try and keep my knife handles inside the dimensions of the wood. I'll then take it to the drill press, drill through those existing holes that we drilled before. Each time I drill a hole, I'll put my pin inside that hole, and that will keep me in line with the next hole and then the next hole. Some knives I put 6 pins, some are 3, some are 2, and a lanyard hole. It all depends on the knife, but I like to do it each time. Put the pin in the hole, hold the knife together. Now we're trimming up the handle piece. Both pieces are now together and we're trimming it up. This will just take off the bulk. After this, we'll take it to the grinder and properly shape it. Get that profile of the handle down, so then when it's glued up on the knife, there isn't so much to grind away. What I'd then like to do is take those pieces while they're together, take them to the grinder and grind the top portion of the handles where they meet the knife. You need to finish this here before it's glued up, because once it's glued on the knife, you're not going to be able to sand it and polish it. I'll do the same thing, 36 grit belt, 120, 240, 400, and then I'll buff. Here I'm mixing up West Systems epoxy. You can see that I've ground a fuller into each of the scales. I'll use a 3/4 inch round wheel on the grinder, and this will give a place for the glue to fill up rather than squeeze out and you lose all your glue. Once the knife's glued up, looking pretty awesome, now we'll take it to the grinder and we'll begin the handle shaping. This is obviously the next day. I use a 24-hour epoxy. So I'll take it to the grinder, get the sides all nice and flat, and profile the handle. I missed that footage. We can do that on the next video. But now here I've got it in the vise wrapped in leather, and I'm just sanding. I think I'm probably at 320. I'll go 320, 400, 600, and then a buff. Get it all nice and smooth and contoured to the hand, all nice and pretty. Here I'm etching my maker's mark into the blade. I missed that footage also, but this is the equipment that I use. I make my own salt, vinegar and water solution. I'm not sure if it's the right ratios, but it tends to work every time. Once this process is done, what I'll generally do then is begin the Kydex sheath making process. That's my foam press. What I'm doing now is taping up the blade with 2 layers of masking tape. This gives enough clearance between the blade and the inside of the Kydex sheath, just so you don't get all that rubbing and scratching on the knife. I'll do another video on how I do Kydex later on, because I've also missed that footage. But yeah, basically tape up the knife, 2 layers of tape, and don't overlap your tape because that will show up in the press. Yeah, so here's the finished product. Turned out really nice. The customer was incredibly happy with it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.